Yeah.
Yes, it's
I mean, I guess it's the same for brands too. I mean,
yeah.
from the brand side, you've been working with
Hmm.
a lot of influencers in different markets, specifically like in the DACH region, right? And France and Belgium. But is it the same for startups? Do you have any insights on startups when it comes to building your account? Because I meet a lot of brands, like the small ones, so they can start with like
Yeah.
3K. But I know just getting from
Yeah.
3K followers to 10K, that's a long
Yeah.
journey. But
Yeah.
yeah, is it the same struggle you see, or how do you think brands can do stuff organically to follow, to grow their followers?
Yeah, I think the key thing is just to be consistent. Even though you want to try some new things and you don't see results directly, I think the best way is just to stick to your plan and post as many content as possible. And also try some new things. There are so many trends nowadays that you can just make your own, and that will literally create a buzz around the content that you create. So I think that's the best way to grow your account. But also, maybe we'll talk about it later, whenever we have influencers also included in the whole social media planning, then we can also increase the reach of the account and the number of followers, because that influencer will just bring awareness to the account. So that's like a 360 approach. And then you can definitely build up on your following very, very quickly if you're lucky. But definitely staying consistent with your content, delivering different types of content, snackable content. I think that's also very, very key to have snackable content that
What's
people
that?
will just love. A snackable content would be just a piece that is not too long and not too short. Maybe just imagine if you have like a reel or a YouTube shorts that lasts 5 seconds or even less than 5 seconds with like a little text or a little trend, and then that's done. And you're like, and you want to rewatch it again, or you want to swipe it up, and you want to basically just end up having the whole feed and you binge watch everything on that account. That's basically what the snackable content is. Very relatable, very fun, very quick and easy.
And do you think brands should copy kind of that? Or how should the feed look like for brands? Obviously, it depends on the brand and what they want
Yeah.
to, build when it comes to branding, because those are the things we want to talk about today, like the branding part. But
Yep.
but like I can feel like when I meet some brands, you can see on their feed like, okay, here they are very restrictive, like nothing gets
Mm-hmm.
through here, everything is very the same. But then you see other brands, they're going wild, and I think they usually get better engagement. But the brands you worked at, what's what have you seen is working the best? Like what type of I guess approach should you have when you building your feed to get more followers and get just overall engagement?
Mm-hmm. I mean, you also said that it really depends on the industry and the type of product you're selling, right? I've been working with brands that were selling sports clothing or even jewelry or interior products. And of course, when you have those brands that are very focused on aesthetics, it comes very naturally to have a feed that is just about the aesthetics. Same as whenever you're having reels and you want to have like this very nice picture on the reel that people would just love. I think that is what a consistent feed would look like if you are in the beauty industry or the makeup industry or the jewelry and all of those kind of things. If you sell maybe some other products or even a service or something, you can have a very diversified feed. You can have, I don't know, quotes, or maybe even have a meme. I don't know, have another reel, or you're, I don't know, interviewing your team, interviewing your customers. You can make it more relatable as well. So you can really play around. That really depends on the goal that you want to achieve with your feed and how consistent you want to be with your brand image. At the end of the day, it's all about brand image as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you said, consistency is key.
Yeah.
Also, obviously, he will help working with the influencers. They will bring in their audience into your feed,
Yes.
and that's usually you forget that as a brand owner. Like you think that everyone would check your domain, like your website, and go in and check your
Mhm.
product, but that's usually not the case. They go into your Instagram and then they check
Exactly.
everything from there. But
Yeah.
I mean, you've been in this space for a long time, and you've been in the ups and downs from the early days when everything was super easy, and now it's a little bit tougher. What would you say is the update of the whole influencer marketing landscape when it comes to like trends discount codes, branding, all that. Like if you could give us just a mean update in, based on your perspective and experience.
Yeah, sure. I've been working in the field since 2019 and mostly for German brands, also just to give a context of the observations that I have. And I feel like it's really striking to see now with some hindsight that influencer marketing was approached heavily as a performance channel. Like all of the influencer marketeers were approaching heavily to influencers. Sometimes we would have over 400 collaborations per month per country. This is insane when you think about this. It would be up to 4 collaborations per influencer in a month, and all of them would include a code. So it was heavily focused on sales. That was the one and only goal that companies and brands wanted to achieve with influencer marketing. That would be to have the sales coming in. And now when I see the difference between how it is approached today, or at least the way that successful brands are doing it, is that because they also understood that influencer marketing can be a performance channel, that's for sure, but it's also most and foremost a branding and an awareness channel. And maybe we can talk about this very quickly, but if you're aware of the whole customer journey type of stages, where it starts with awareness, then of course consideration, then you have conversion, and then loyalty. And I think a lot of companies back in the day tend to have influencer marketing as a bottom of funnel channel, where really it's just a top of funnel channel. And now more companies, at least in Germany, get to understand and approach influencer marketing in that way and focus heavily on awareness, heavily on branding, having more and more presence online, but also physically with their events, having more little branding things that would make them a love brand. We hear that all the time here in Germany. We want to be a love brand, but that's exactly what it's about, because that's what branding is going to create. It's going to create an emotional bond between you, like the brand, and the influencers, but also between you, the brand, and the customers. Yeah. So that is the main thing that I could see from back in the day. It's that shift of approach when it comes to how do we do influencer marketing internally as a brand. And of course, if we want to talk about KPIs as well, I think that changed drastically as well. I think the focus on certain KPIs like the engagement rate or even the revenue somehow really decreased over time. And I think since it's all about being authentic and having really organic content, we would look more into, okay, this is a good view rate or a good story view rate. We would still look at the PMs, of course, even though they really increased over time. But I think also the way that we evaluate influencer marketing changed because of that shift of approach. So these would be the most striking thing I would, put forward.
And curious to hear, if we think of the past discount code collaborations and nowadays more branding, engagement focused collaborations, how are those two different when it comes to, how does it look? Like before you would talk about storytelling, product, why you should buy it, and then the discount code. But how does that look like right now? If you want to set up a collaboration or a brief so it would feel authentic, like how would that look like if you're a brand?
I think I think we're a little, but the way I would approach it is also when it comes to the format of how the influencer is going to promote the product or the service you're having. So basically, I know a lot of influencers are heavy on stories. So it's very clear to have this, here's the product and here's my code, click on my link and that's it. But I think that the different formats are also here to be used. So if you want to really have a good online branding campaign, you can go on a reel, or you can even take a TikTok post and then you could go viral. And it doesn't have to necessarily include a code or a link. It could be something that the influencer would just include into their daily life. So it has nothing to do about, here is the new brand that I just discovered. It would be more about, here is my new skincare routine, and that is what I'm doing. And then the product comes. So it's also the way that the influencer would present it and how it's going to be delivered to the customer that will make a change. And of course, if you have a very good hook and also like a trend mixed together, I think that is the recipe to just, have the maximum of views.
Yeah. Would you say that's part of the evaluation when you pick the creator, see if they are good at creating these type of hooks?
Yes,
Yeah.
it definitely. Definitely. I think also what is the smartest thing to do is to have influencers that know what works for their community, and they also know how to make the brief that you send them their own. Because I feel like nowadays there is nothing more boring for influencers to receive a briefing that is that long, that has that many guidelines, and basically they just feel lost, or they eventually do not want to work with you because there are so many things that are away from the way that they used to work. Because at the end of the day, those influencers are also content creators. So they need to create, they need to be able to have a brief and be like, oh, that's the idea I have in mind. I'm going to make some bomb content. And I think that's the way that we should evolve now, and really have this kind of freedom, or like blank sheet that the influencer can just write and then deliver content that way.
Okay, so more open brief, or what would you say is the perfect brief then? Like, how would you set it up? Just to give some like tips and tricks to brands out there.
I would say probably use less text and more images. When it comes to presenting the brand and presenting the campaign, I think that is useful to give any type of information, right? You want to inform the influencer about what is going on, what kind of new collection you have. Is there anything specific that they need to mention? Maybe in a few words. And then when it comes to the content creation, have some visuals, maybe show them an idea that they can make themselves. Or if you really want to push it further, if you really want to show the influencer that you know what kind of content they're doing, you can even use the content that they've been creating for other brands and say, hey, we really like that kind of content, and we see that it had, I don't know how many views, and we really like that. Do you think that you can make the kind of content for our brand? And really try to approach it as a collaboration rather than just, hey, here's the briefing and we want you to make XYZ type of content. So I think there is no perfect briefing. I think there is just a more efficient briefing that would let the influencer make the whole product or the whole service their own. Definitely.
Yeah. I think that, I never heard about that, like sharing visuals, basically for sharing other videos from her, or I guess past collaborations from the brand too, just like similar to this.
Yeah, exactly. Or you could also even think about having a video briefing. So not using any type of content a creator made, but the team inside, like the marketeers, can also make a video of the briefing with some images, with some inspiration, and then send it rather than having a PDF that every other brand just sends. It's just a different way to approach it. And it also gives some excitement to the creator to be like, oh, I received that briefing, and it really gives me like the excitement that I need to create a cool content.
Yeah, I love it. And what I mean, obviously it's great to do this type of brand collaborations, but everything, gets slower, it takes more time to see results. Like, what would you say based on your experience? Like, what can you expect? Because in them we want to see sales too, right? So it's the top funnel. Would you say that you can expect results pretty fast because you converted them on other channels? Or what's the timeline here? Like, what can you expect? How long should you do this kind of brand collaborations before you see any results?
I think it depends on the kind of activations that you have. I will just be very clear by saying that I feel like every single brand should start branding from the very beginning of funding their brands, so that they do not see, I don't know, customers falling apart or any kind of bad results coming in the middle of the way. I think that would be the first thing to say. But also, depending on the kind of activations that you make, you will see results either directly or probably in a few months. Because if we think about having an event probably takes about 6 months on average to put in place, depending on the number of guests that you have, or depending on the big, like how big the event will be. But if you really want to convert on that event, you can also think about, okay, we're going to make a campaign around that event that would not only raise awareness, but also convert the people. So what we're going to do is that we're going to brief the influencers on the event to share something specific with their community, or even the internal social media team will share something specific on that specific day of the event, so that you can see the results of, we built an event for 6 months and now we want the revenue coming back in. So it really depends if you want to make an event, for instance, if you want to make a co-creation that will take years to get some revenues back in for sure. But if you want to make something smaller, let's say you have a digital campaign or anything like that, you could also expect results probably after a month or two. But also, the most important thing to say is that at the end of the day, the goal of influencer marketing is not to only make revenue. So I get that a lot of companies will say, hey, we also want to see the return on investment on this. But I think the return on investment would be much more than just having the revenue coming in. You would have probably new customers coming in. You will probably have new awareness, people discovering your brand, having different touch points that maybe you didn't see before or that you was not able to reach before. So it's not only about the numbers. It's really about having or creating, expanding the ecosystem of your brand to different targets that you were just not able to reach.
But why do you think, you touched on it a little bit before, but why do you think branding is so important, specific for these type of D2C brands that were doing so much sales focused campaign before?
Yeah. I think branding is just so important because that is how you will create an emotional bond with your customer. Because if you think about it, you and I are customers of different brands that we like. But there is always this one thing that will make you feel like, I like that brand better, just because there is this little thing. And I think nowadays with all the brands that we have, it's very easy to just go see what the competition has to offer. But just because that brand has a very strong DNA, or that brand is very active or very engaged into something specific that you like, that has a personal bond or a personal connection to you, you would feel like you will be very, very eager to go to that brand, against another. So that's very true. And I think that's where branding is also so clever and so important. It's because it just plays on the emotions. Everyone has, I think, demands that needs to be fulfilled. And as a brand, I think you also have the need to fulfill those things to the customer, but in a way that is just so authentic and just so natural and so engaged that the customer will say, okay, that brand and not brand XYZ. So it's all about the whole emotional connection that the customers have with your brand.
Yeah, it's easy to forget. And in the end, if you look at all the brands and the products out there, they are kind of all the same in a way. Anyone can now make a t-shirt or whatever. So I think playing that branding card is even more important. What brands do you, I think you mentioned a few brands when we talked, but what brands do you think right now that are working with influencers, but kind of using that branding card, if you can call it that you think are doing a great job?
Yeah, I think when we spoke, I mentioned Refi. And again, it's a brand that I love a lot. And I just saw that just a few weeks ago, they just launched this Refi project. Basically, they're about to launch a new product. I think it's a concealer. I'm not sure, but my feeling tells me it's a concealer. And they just decided to make the customers participate into the photo shoot of the campaign. And that to me is just so smart. So here you can also see that having branding is just not only about having connection with your influencers, it's really about having a connection with your community. And that's where they were smart into building a community event and a community happening. And so many people came there. They created amazing content on social media. That's all you can see on social media. Everyone wants to be part of that campaign. And probably when the concealer will launch, it will be sold out. So that's literally a very, very good strategy to just have that, not only focusing on influencer events, but also have the community involved into your strategy. So that's one very good brand that I would mention. But again, over the last weeks, we saw, I think it was the Fenty X Puma event. I mean, maybe talking about Rihanna is very far away, but again, she just mobilized the whole international community of influencers. So it was not only about having the United States mobilized, but it was having French influencers, influencers from Italy, influencers from Europe. And everyone was talking about that launch party. And probably now the Creeper Fatty are sold out because everyone just wants to have a Creeper Fatty. I'm not even a customer of Puma, that I'm just considering buying a shoe, just because the influencers that I love were part of the party and they were also personally invited by Rihanna's team. So it's all about those little, attentions that a brand sends to a pool of influencers that will make you think, wow, that brand is so thoughtful, or wow, that brand really wants to include the people into their DNA. And I think that is the smartest choice to have, because at the end of the day, all of us are customers, influencers included. So I think, just to mention a few keywords, having a community and including the community would definitely be something to do. Being as inclusive as possible when it comes to the target group that you have, the customers that you have, being present, not only digitally, but also physically. I think it's also very important for customers to see who is behind the brand, what are the faces that are talking to them every day when they're setting up the campaigns. That is really, really important. And probably, just being very quick to jump on the trends that are relevant to their industry, because then, if not, you're just outside of the pop culture. The most important is just to feed into the culture that all of the social media users are using. And if you're not, then you would probably be 2000 and late, So you want to just keep up with all of that's happening on social media for sure.
But how do you follow the trends? Like if you be a brand owner, like what's the tricks to just follow the trends on TikTok, Instagram?
Yeah. I mean, I think most of the brands emerge on TikTok, if I'm not mistaken. That's where I see the most trends. And I think it's just about seeing, okay, that brand is really cool, or that brand is just not relevant. And if it's just cool, let's just make it our own. I mean, for one company that I was working for, there was this brand of having this trend, of having content in the office and having those little 5 seconds interaction with your mate and having, the caption on top and saying, when my bestie does this, or when my bestie does that in the office. And those are the type of things that you can just jump on. And it's very easy, honestly. And it's the same when you work with influencers. They are also the ones knowing about trends. If they tell you, hey, that is a trend that really appeals to me, I can also loop you in on that. Then it's also a smart way to keep up with this, because they know about it more, probably better than you. So it's just about exchanging on that, being aware of what's going on social media, on TikTok, exchanging also with other brands maybe that you are not a competitor with. But it's also just about having the communication and interactions about what is actually going on right now.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I think a good step is just think of the brands out there that you think are cool, or where you feel like you have some kind of audience overlap. If Refi is someone I look up to, but I'm maybe selling something different, but it's still someone I look up to. Maybe I follow them and just kind of see what they are up to. If we go switch a little bit and think of like the startups or the smaller brands out there, obviously want to build this community and want to start from beginning. And building brand is cost a lot. But if you think of the different stories you've gone through, I know you mentioned an online bank. Like, how can you first of all get all the collaborations? Because I think many brands forget that when you reach out to creators, it doesn't mean that they will work with you. First of all, will they even answer? You think like, I can just buy a tool, I can source, start reaching out, and then everything will get solved. Like, but tell me a little bit more. Like, I think you had a great story about one of the clients you mentioned to me, and how you kind of tackle that, because I know it can be hard to get the collaborations. But tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. I used to work on this 2-month project for a sustainable online banking app. And we were basically trying to increase the number of accounts that that bank has. And we just basically get into the sourcing phase. And I think our list was big of 400 creators. So we had some creators to talk to. And the way that we try to approach it is that banking provider has an amazing USP, is that they're using the money of their clients into sustainable projects, meaning that nothing goes for wars or weapons or any kind of things that would be questionable, basically what all the traditional banks are doing and you're not aware of. But they're really trying to make the finance world a bit better and a bit sexier, let's say. And so we really tried to put this into the outreach message just to also make sure that we have an impact on the influencer and not that it's just one other outreach message that they received. So we tried to be as emotional as possible into the outreach message saying, hey, we are this online banking app and we really want to make sure that your money is not invested into an industry that you don't know about or that you don't like. And we really want to make an impact, and we want to make that impact with you, basically. And this is what we offer. So we had a huge offering phase as well with a budget set up. So in our minds, having this really strong emotional connection would probably make, I don't know, 300 creators on board. Like our expectations were crazy because we believed in it so hard. But the reality was that we realized that so many creators just basically declined our offer because they were either not interested in it, they didn't see the value in it, even though it was something that was really, really good. It was basically a banking app trying to make a social effort and working for a social cause. But they just didn't feel comfortable talking about that either. Of course, if we want to mention the budgets and the CPM increasing, I think we also talked about that in the beginning, that the CPMs have been increasing over and over and over. So the budgets were definitely probably not up to par for some creators, and that's why they declined. But even with that emotional and that strong message and connection, we really struggled to have influencers on board just because they felt some type of way with the banking industry. And I think that's where probably the branding topic could have been a bit more smooth if they already had built up a community, or if they would have built up, I don't know, any kind of very strong emotional content that would already push that USP forward, saying, hey, did you know that that banking app is doing this and this with your money, but we're not doing this, you know? This would probably already raise awareness to a lot of customers and a lot of influencers. They would have heard about it and they would probably be willing to work with us. But it has been a struggle. Eventually, we definitely had some influencers on board, but it was with a little bit of sweat. That's for sure.
And how do you avoid, and I think many brands can relate to this, when it comes to payment, especially with services where you obviously need to pay, sometimes you can gift products and all that, but with the bigger ones you need to pay. What would you say? What's your recommendation if you want to avoid getting in this trap of like they just want the money and they just do a content piece and done deal and then they go away? Like, how would you? Do you have any tricks and tips on like avoiding that to happen, so you feel like you're getting someone that really want to work with you and kind of love your product and all that?
Yeah, for sure. I would say the first thing that would come to my mind also related to the sourcing is that we really try to study the influencers as much as possible to see if they would fit into our categories and into our criterias. Of course, if you have an influencer that is not related to your industry, then I don't think it makes any sense. But also one key thing that we did during the whole campaign was to set up a campaign waiting list. I would call it like that. Basically, we had like this type form that we sent to the influencers, and we let them see and answer different questions. And in those questions, there were some of them that were very compelling. Basically, we were just trying to see if they were willing to, let's say, ditch their traditional banking provider to come to us. And that was also a way to see if the influencer was convinced by our product or convinced by the fact that they didn't want to be a part of the whole traditional financial world anymore and want to do something sustainable and participate in a good cause. So that was a very key thing that we included into this campaign waiting list, just to also be sure that we would have some new customers, we would have those influencers dedicated to the campaign, but also dedicated to the cause, so that they would not only be there for the money, but they would also be there to support that banking provider going into those sustainable projects. So here at the end of the campaign, we could see that just a few were also very compelled, because we were also lucky to have some influencers that were already clients of that banking provider. So it all made sense at the end of the campaign to have influencers that were already client and very dedicated to the cause, and to also see that some of them were not clients, were not even knowing about that banking provider, but still eventually decided to switch to us just because they were sold by the cause. So that was a good point.
I love that. It reminds me of one of the episodes I recorded a few weeks ago. He mentioned a hack where now it's a D2C brand, so they have like Shopify. He would just go in and check the customers that have done maybe 4 or 5 repeated purchases the past 6 months. Yeah. And just basically Google them and find their IG name and then collaborate with them, because then they probably love the product already. But for some brands it's hard to do that. But when it comes to that hack of like doing kind of like a survey / waiting list in your funnel when you reach out to everyone, where do you put that where do you put that step?
Yeah, we put it directly in the outreach as well. So basically when we approached them and said, hey, we're this sustainable banking app and we're doing things that your traditional bank is not doing, we would really love for you to be part of the campaign. So if you want to join us in the movement, could you please just fill that type form so that we know that you want to be part of it? And basically they would just click on a link and see the type form.
Okay, nice. Already in the first email. But if we just jump a little bit before we kind of summarize this episode, but I'm now extra curious to hear the email outreach part. Do you have, what type of structure would you set up? Like, what have you seen work the best to get as many answers as possible? Like, how do you set up the first email, the follow-ups and everything? And advice?
Yeah, what we did even before starting the whole outreach phase, we had like let's say a bank of template that we set up for every single stage of the outreach. So we would have a template for the first outreach, the follow-up, the last follow-up, the acceptance, the refusal. So we really had every single case. In case they ask any question, we were prepared for that specific question or that other specific question. So we basically try to come up with the type of pain points that they would have, and everything would already be answered, basically. That's how we approach the whole thing.
Okay, that's amazing. But then I guess you learned also on the way, like we usually get these type of questions. So I guess you kind of have like a top 5 list of questions that is very common, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The questions that we had was, what do you provide? Why would I subscribe to you? What kind of service do you offer? Do we have to pay for the subscription? Those are the things we also had. And eventually, yes, you have to pay for a subscription. Can I just cancel my abo whenever I want? So all of those type of questions. Can I also set up an account if I don't live in Germany? All of those financial questions that also were very new to me. But yeah, those were the very basic questions that we were receiving.
Oh, but that's nice. Now when you say it, I think I heard about that from another influencer expert. Like, we were kind of creating a few templates because we got so many questions about, is this vegan? And they were like, here's a ready answer. Sometimes they even answer that question in the first initial email. So they already said like, we are vegan or something like that in the beginning. So
exactly.
That question.
Yeah. I mean, also throughout the campaign, since there were so many questions that we also didn't anticipate, we would also add them into our little template funnel, let's say. So whenever we were like, oh, okay, that person is definitely going to come up with that question, we would also include it in the follow-up email, for instance, or the last chance email saying, hey, maybe that was not clear to you, but we are that kind of brand, or we provide that kind of service, or we could also do this kind of content, because a lot of them were also coming up with content questions a lot. So they were thinking, okay, you're a banking provider. What kind of content do you want? Do you want something very strict, very this, very that? So they were thinking that they would not have a lot of freedom. And basically, that was also one of the points that were explaining why we didn't have so many people on board, because they were probably afraid that the content would be too complex, let's say, where really it was not the case.
But then you basically just wrote it out like, this is, free ideas, do whatever you want.
Yes.
You kind of, okay.
Yeah, exactly. We had to find a compromise, of course, with the client and what they wanted to push forward. But what we didn't want to do, at least me as a consultant, I didn't want to send this whole, here is the list of things that you have to say or things that you have to do. So I also had to make the client understand that we cannot, or at least we should not approach it that way, but we should also give them a little bit of freedom so that they feel comfortable creating content that makes sense to them and to their community.
Yeah, because in the end, you could always deny, right? If you feel like, whoa, this was too much, you can always say, this is not the right fit.
This is not for me. Yeah. We had a lot of people say, well, eventually this is not for me. This is a subject that is a little touchy. This is something I don't feel comfortable with. So that happened.
Yeah. Cool. And as a final kind of point, you've been in the industry now for like 5+ years. What do you see coming up ahead, like in the E+ marketing space? Any trends or anything that you think will happen in the future that could be interesting for brands to know?
Yeah, I think a lot of people talk about this, but for me, having virtual influencers or AI influencers will definitely be the next thing. I think I already saw that with like a few advertisements or even a few influencers doing that themselves, with like transforming their own faces into being someone else. This is a bit cringe in my opinion, but it will definitely happen. It's already there. You already have virtual influencers. There is one that is very, very famous, but I can't remember her name. But you already have virtual influencers, so they're huge and famous. So this is here to stay. But what we will probably see is that we will have virtual ads. So probably advertisements with people who are not real. They will just present a product or present a service to you when you would not even see that it's just a robot. So this is definitely something that companies would need to jump on, because also when I think about it, it also just makes sense if you want to scale up your business, because also internally you would probably be a little bit, let's say it's going to be too busy. It's going to probably request a lot of effort internally. So also having those kind of AI ads or AI, whatever you want to do with AI, it feels like you can do anything with AI nowadays. But definitely having AI ads or AI influencers will help companies also reaching their whole effort and the whole growth that they would want to achieve, for sure.
Yeah. And now when you mentioned that you heard that content creators, like influencers themselves, are creating kind of like a copycat of themselves, that makes sense, because they already know the tricks, in the end, like being a content creating content that people want to see and watch and all that is quite hard. But they already know the secret sauces. They know how to do it.
Of course.
So it's pretty natural that they will be the first ones that actually create an AI version of themselves or just
themselves. Yeah. And I think that's also, I think that was not to divert, but there was a Black Mirror episode of that. But that's basically literally happening, because I have a friend of a friend who's also a content creator who is already thinking about creating an AI version of himself and selling it to companies so that they can use it as a UGC content creator. That is already happening. So I think this is going to happen probably sooner or later. But that's going to be a reality, and I'm very, very eager to see what this is going to bring.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for the whole conversation. How we,
of course,
sharing about the whole branding part. going away from Discount Code, doing more branding, building community, and fun to hear the story about the bag. Yeah,
Yes, sure.
thanks for joining.
Yes, sure. That was my pleasure. My pleasure always.
Nice.